Let me tell you something that might sound completely backwards. The pain you've been trying so desperately to get rid of might actually be the most intelligent thing happening in your life right now. I know that sounds insane. Every self-help book, every spiritual teacher, every well-meaning friend has probably told you the opposite, that you need to release your pain, let it go, transcend it somehow. But what if they've all been reading the map upside down? What if your recurring pain isn't a sign that you're broken or stuck or failing at healing? What if it's actually an encoded message from the deepest part of you, what the ancients called the Akashic code, trying desperately to get your attention? See, most people think pain that repeats is punishment, some kind of karmic debt they're paying off for sins they don't remember committing. But here's the truth that'll probably make you uncomfortable. You're not being punished. You're being initiated. That depression that keeps circling back, that relationship pattern you can't seem to break, that inexplicable anxiety that shows up like clockwork. It's not random and it's not a malfunction. It's a language. And once you learn to read it, once you understand why it keeps repeating, everything changes. Not because the pain disappears, but because it finally reveals what it's been protecting all along. So if you're tired of fighting the same battles, if you're exhausted from trying to heal something that refuses to stay healed, if you're ready to stop treating your pain like an enemy and start seeing it as the oracle it actually is, then what I'm about to share with you might be the most important shift you'll ever make. Because the code isn't hidden in some mystical realm you need special powers to access. It's hidden in the very thing you've been running from. There's a strange thing that happens when someone feels stuck in life. They don't usually say, "I feel trapped in my choices." They say something deeper, something that sounds almost mythical. It's my karma. But here's what most people miss entirely. Karma isn't some cosmic punishment system, keeping you locked in place like a prisoner serving time for crimes you don't remember committing. It's actually a symbol, an unfinished one, and you've been reading it wrong this whole time. The soul doesn't speak in sentences or logical arguments. It speaks in symbols, in fragments of dreams, in that recurring nightmare about the abandoned house you keep visiting. When you say it's karma, what you're really saying is, there's a pattern here I haven't decoded yet. Think about it like this. Imagine finding an ancient manuscript written in a language you almost understand. You recognize some words, catch glimpses of meaning, but the full message stays hidden behind a veil of misinterpretation. That's exactly what's happening when pain keeps circling back into your life. Your psyche isn't punishing you. It's trying to show you something through the only language it knows. Symbolic repetition. A woman I knew kept attracting emotionally unavailable partners, one after another, like clockwork. She'd say, "It's my karma to suffer in love," as if some cosmic accountant had decided her fate. But when she finally stopped looking for the punishment and started looking for the symbol, everything shifted. She realized each unavailable partner was a mirror reflecting her own unavailability to herself, her exile from her inner house, the place where her true pulse lived. The Akashic code isn't hidden in some ethereal realm you need special powers to access. It's hidden in plain sight, in the patterns you keep living but never fully reading. Every time you feel that familiar ache, that sense of return to the same emotional place, your soul is handing you a fragment of the code. But most people panic when the pattern appears again. They think not this again when they should be thinking, here's another piece of the oracle. The difference between staying trapped and becoming free isn't about breaking karma. It's about finishing the reading. Because once you understand what the symbol actually means, once you see the ancestral wound it's pointing to, the intuition it's trying to awaken, the pattern doesn't need to repeat anymore. And that's when something even more unsettling reveals itself. The pain itself starts speaking in a language you can finally understand. When pain shows up for the 3rd, 4th, or 10th time in your life, there's a moment where something inside you breaks. Not the kind of breaking that destroys, the kind that cracks open. Most people treat returning pain like an unwanted guest, slamming the door and pretending nobody's home. But here's what the ancient mystery schools understood that we've forgotten. Pain that returns isn't a malfunction of your healing process. It's an oracle that's been knocking on your door, and you keep mistaking its voice for an enemy. The soul doesn't waste energy. If something keeps coming back, it's because there's a message encoded in it that you haven't received yet. Think of it like those dreams where you're searching for something in a dark forest, and you wake up before finding it. Then the next night, you're back in that same forest with the same feeling of urgency pulsing through your chest. There was a man who came to therapy after his third divorce, convinced he was fundamentally broken, cursed to repeat the same cycle forever. He'd sit there saying, "I keep choosing the wrong people," as if his psyche was just randomly malfunctioning. But when we slowed down and looked at the pattern as a symbol rather than a failure, something emerged from the silence. Each relationship ended the exact same way. The moment deep intimacy became possible, he'd create distance. Not consciously. It was like watching someone sleepwalk toward a ruin they'd built themselves. The pattern wasn't punishment. It was a ritual his soul kept performing, trying to show him something about the original abandonment he experienced as a child. The oracle wasn't saying you're doomed to be alone. It was saying there's a fragment of you still standing in that childhood bedroom, waiting to be seen. Once he understood the symbolic language, the pain transformed from enemy to guide. The tricky part is that oracles don't speak in clear instructions. They speak in sensations, in bodily memory, in that tightness in your throat when certain topics come up. Your rational mind wants a straightforward answer. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But the soul operates in mythic time, where past and present collapse into each other, where the wound from 10 years ago and the wound from yesterday are actually the same wound wearing different masks. When you feel that familiar ache rising, that shadow creeping back into your awareness, your first instinct is to push it away, to stay positive, to bypass the discomfort. But what if that's exactly the moment the veil becomes thinnest? What if that returning pain is actually the soul's way of saying, "I need you to look deeper this time, to see what you missed before"? Because there's something about pain that keeps coming back that most people never consider. It might not be trying to hurt you at all. It might be trying to initiate you into something your conscious mind hasn't been ready to see. Here's where everything most people believe about healing gets turned upside down. We're taught that pain is the problem and relief is the solution, that the goal of any spiritual journey is to transcend suffering and reach some permanent state of peace. But the soul doesn't work like that. The soul doesn't want you comfortable, it wants you whole. And here's the paradox nobody talks about. Sometimes the very pain you've been trying to escape is actually the only key that fits the lock to your deepest self. Not because suffering is noble or because you need to earn your healing through more hurt, but because certain doors in your inner house only open from the inside, and pain is often what finally gives you the courage to walk through them. Think about it. When have you ever made a truly transformative change in your life during moments of comfort? It's usually when something breaks, when the old structure can no longer hold, that the real shift becomes possible. There's a concept in alchemy called the nigredo, the blackening, the descent into darkness before transformation can occur. It's not metaphorical fluff. It's a precise description of how the psyche actually reorganizes itself. A woman I worked with had spent 15 years in various therapies, workshops, and healing modalities, always feeling like she was getting better, but never quite arriving anywhere real. She knew all the language, shadow work, inner child, boundaries, but it stayed intellectual, like she was reading about the forest without ever stepping into it. Then one day, after a particularly devastating loss, she stopped trying to fix herself. She stopped trying to heal in the way she'd been taught. She just sat with the abyss that opened up inside her, not trying to fill it or understand it, or transform it into something prettier. And that's when something extraordinary happened. In that silence, in that willingness to be with her pain without an agenda, She heard her intuition speak for the first time in decades. Not the ego's voice pretending to be intuition, but the real pulse of her soul. The access key isn't the pain itself. It's what becomes possible when you stop running from it. When you finally turn around and face the thing you've been fleeing, something alchemical occurs in your psyche. The fragment you thought was your enemy reveals itself as the guardian of your deepest truth. This is what all the ancient mystery traditions were pointing to. The descent isn't optional, and it isn't punishment. It's initiation. Your pain knows things about you that your conscious mind has been refusing to acknowledge. It knows about the ancestral wound you inherited, the parts of yourself you exiled to survive, the reconnection that's been waiting on the other side of your fear. But here's the thing most people miss. The pain doesn't become the key because you finally understand it intellectually. It becomes the key the moment you stop trying to get rid of it and start asking, what are you protecting? What are you guarding? What part of my soul is waiting behind you? Because once you ask that question with genuine curiosity instead of resistance, the entire relationship changes. And suddenly you're not fighting your way through life anymore. You're being guided by something much older and wiser than your fear. There's a kind of pain that doesn't announce itself with clear memories or obvious stories. It lives deeper than thought, buried in the body itself, in what some traditions call cellular memory, the places where your flesh holds experiences your mind never processed. You know that feeling when someone raises their voice and suddenly your whole body tenses, even though logically you know you're safe. That's not just a psychological response. That's your cells remembering something, holding a fragment of a trauma that never got integrated. And here's what makes spiritual trauma particularly tricky. It's often invisible. Nobody teaches you to recognize it. A child who grows up in a home where emotions are forbidden doesn't necessarily experience big T trauma, but their soul learns to go into exile, to hide its true pulse behind a veil of acceptable behavior. Years later, that person might be successful, functional, even spiritual, but something essential remains fragmented, locked away in the cellular memory of that original silencing. Think about what happens when you try to meditate or do deep inner work and suddenly feel overwhelmed, anxious, or like you need to escape. Most people interpret this as, I'm doing it wrong, or meditation isn't for me. But often, what's actually happening is that you're approaching the edge of an unintegrated spiritual trauma, a moment when your soul tried to reach out and was met with rejection, misunderstanding, or punishment. Maybe it was the time you told your mother about your intuitive knowing and she laughed. Maybe it was the religious environment that taught you your body was sinful. Maybe it was the moment you felt a deep connection to something sacred and someone important to you called it foolish. These moments create ruptures in your relationship with your own inner oracle, and those ruptures don't just fade with time. They get stored in the tissue, in the nervous system, in the way you breathe when certain topics arise. A man I knew couldn't explain why he felt panic every time he tried to pray, even though he desperately wanted a spiritual connection. It wasn't until we explored his childhood that he remembered. His father used prayer as punishment, making him kneel for hours as discipline. His cells remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The challenge with cellular memory is that you can't think your way out of it. You can understand intellectually that your father's behavior was wrong, that you deserve spiritual connection, that your intuition is valid, but the body holds its own truth, its own remembrance of what happened in those moments when your soul tried to emerge and was pushed back into the shadows. This is why traditional talk therapy sometimes hits a wall with spiritual trauma. The wound isn't just in your thoughts. It's in the way your diaphragm tightens when you try to speak your truth, in the way your heart races when you consider stepping into your power, in the way your stomach drops when you think about being fully seen. Healing this kind of trauma requires a different approach, one that honors the body as the keeper of sacred memory, that creates rituals of return for the exiled parts, that offers the nervous system proof that it's finally safe to come home. Because your cells are waiting for that moment of reconnection, that instant when the inner house opens its doors again and the fragments scattered across mythic time can finally gather in one place. And when that happens, it's not just healing, it's a complete reorganization of how you inhabit your own existence. There's something deeply unsettling about watching yourself play out a role you never remember auditioning for. You wake up one day and realize you've been the caretaker in every relationship, or the rebel or the invisible one, or the scapegoat, and you can't pinpoint the exact moment you signed up for this part. That's because you didn't. These archetypal roles aren't conscious choices. They're inherited scripts written in a language older than your personal memory. Your soul slipped into a costume that was hanging in the closet of your family system, your ancestral line, your collective unconscious, and somewhere along the way, the costume became so familiar you forgot you were wearing it. The prisoner archetype isn't about literal captivity. It's about inhabiting a role so completely that you can't imagine existing outside of it. It's the woman who's always strong, always holding everyone together, who doesn't know how to be vulnerable because the family oracle assigned her the role of the rock before she could even speak. Think about how this plays out in real life. A man grows up as the golden child, the one everyone pins their hopes on, the one who's supposed to succeed where others failed. Nobody explicitly tells him, "This is your role forever." But every family dinner, every proud smile when he achieves, every subtle disappointment when he shows weakness, reinforces the script. His soul gets imprisoned in this archetypal pattern, and decades later he's burnt out, anxious, unable to rest because rest feels like betrayal. He's not living his life, he's performing a ritual that was written generations before he was born. The scary part is that these roles feel like identity. When someone asks, "Who are you?" the prisoner archetype answers before your true soul gets a chance to speak. You say, "I'm the responsible one," or "I'm the black sheep," or "I'm the peacemaker." And you believe it's the truth, when really it's just the fragment of a much larger story you've been unconsciously reenacting. Breaking free from these archetypal prisons requires something most people aren't willing to do. You have to see the role as a role, not as your essence. You have to catch yourself mid-performance and ask, who wrote this script, and who would I be if I put it down? That question alone can create a kind of vertigo, because most of us have been playing these roles for so long that we've confused them with our actual soul. There's a concept in Jungian psychology about individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are beneath all the inherited roles and projected identities. It's terrifying because it means disappointing people, breaking unspoken contracts, stepping out of the archetypal costume your family system needs you to wear. But here's what happens when you stay imprisoned in a role your soul never chose. The pain keeps repeating, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your true self keeps trying to break through the character you're playing, keeps creating friction between the mask and the face beneath it. And that friction? That's not your enemy. That's your soul trying to stage a prison break, trying to show you there's an exit you haven't noticed yet, hidden behind the mirror you've been staring into your whole life. Here's something that'll mess with your mind. Your brain is literally addicted to your pain, not because you're masochistic or broken, but because of how the neuropsychological system is wired. The brain is a pattern recognition machine, and it prioritizes familiar over good. Think about that for a second. Your nervous system would rather return to a painful pattern it knows than venture into unknown territory, even if that unknown territory might be healing. This is why people stay in toxic relationships, why you keep choosing the same type of unavailable partner, why you sabotage yourself right before success. It's not that you consciously want to suffer, it's that your brain has created neural pathways around that suffering, and those pathways have become highways your thoughts automatically travel down. The repetition isn't punishment, it's your brain doing what it thinks will keep you safe even when the safety is slowly destroying you. There's actual neuroscience behind this. When you experience something repeatedly, your brain creates what's called a default mode network around that experience. It's like your psyche builds an entire infrastructure around the familiar pain, neurotransmitter patterns, hormonal responses. Even the way your body holds tension becomes organized around the cycle. A woman who grew up with an angry father might find herself drawn to partners who have that same edge of volatility. Her conscious mind is screaming, "Not again," but her unconscious system is whispering, "This feels like home." And here's the really twisted part. When she finally meets someone kind and stable, her nervous system freaks out. The kindness feels dangerous because it's unfamiliar. Her body literally doesn't know how to process safety because it's been wired for decades to expect chaos. So she either pushes the healthy person away or she unconsciously creates drama to make the relationship feel more normal. That's not her being self-destructive. That's her brain trying to return to the only emotional temperature it recognizes as real. Breaking this addiction requires understanding that you're not fighting against your willpower. You're working with the actual architecture of your nervous system. You can't just decide to stop returning to painful cycles. You have to create new neural pathways that feel safer than the old ones. This is where the body comes in, where ritual becomes medicine, where you have to literally teach your cells that there's another way to exist. It means sitting with the discomfort of unfamiliar goodness, breathing through the anxiety that comes when life stops being chaotic, allowing your system to slowly rewire itself around peace instead of crisis. The soul might be ready for transformation, might be longing for reconnection to your inner house, but if your brain is still addicted to the old cycle, you'll keep getting pulled back into the forest of familiar suffering. The key isn't to shame yourself for the repetition. It's to recognize that your brain has been trying to protect you the only way it knows how. And now you're teaching it a new language, showing it that the pulse of real safety doesn't feel like the adrenaline-soaked chaos it's been mistaking for home. That rewiring, that's not just healing. That's your nervous system finally learning to trust the return to your true self. There's a kind of loyalty most people never name, never even recognize they're carrying. It's the silent pact you made, not consciously, but cellularly, to carry the pain your ancestors couldn't process. You might not know the details of your great-grandmother's grief or your grandfather's trauma, but your body remembers. It remembers in the way your throat closes when you try to speak your truth, in the inexplicable sadness that visits you on certain dates, in patterns of survival that made sense 3 generations ago but are suffocating you now. This is what Jung called the psychic inheritance, the emotional and spiritual debts that get passed down through bloodlines like heirlooms nobody asked for. And here's the really difficult part. Somewhere deep in your unconscious, you believe that if you heal, if you break free, if you stop carrying this weight, you'll be betraying the ones who suffered before you, as if your pain is the only thing keeping their memory alive. Think about how this shows up in families. A lineage of women who all struggle with their voice, who all learn to make themselves small, who all carry this ancestral wound around being seen. Nobody talks about it directly. There's no family meeting where someone says, "We don't speak up in this bloodline." But the pattern persists across generations, like a ritual nobody remembers the origin of. A young woman in this line starts therapy, starts finding her voice, starts taking up space, and suddenly she feels this overwhelming guilt, this sense that she's abandoning something sacred. That's the silent pact activating. Her unconscious believes that her grandmother's silence was a sacrifice, and to break that silence now would somehow dishonor that sacrifice. So she stays quiet, not because she wants to, but because breaking free feels like a form of exile from her own lineage. The oracle of her intuition is screaming for liberation, but the ancestral veil is whispering, "Stay loyal to what came before you." Breaking this pact is one of the most profound acts of courage a soul can undertake. It's not about rejecting your ancestors or pretending their suffering didn't matter. It's about recognizing that you can honor their struggle without continuing it. It's understanding that the greatest tribute you can give to those who suffered is to break the cycle, to be the one who finally says, "This ends with me." There's a ritualistic quality to this kind of liberation. You're not just healing yourself, you're healing backwards through time, offering your ancestors the freedom they couldn't access. Imagine it like this. Every time you choose differently, every time you speak when the pattern tells you to be silent, every time you allow yourself joy when the lineage only knew survival, you're creating a rupture in mythic time. You're showing the fragments of ancestral pain that there's another way, that the prison doesn't have to stay locked forever. And here's what nobody tells you about breaking these silent pacts. At first, it feels like betrayal. Your nervous system will panic. Your dreams might fill with images of abandonment. You might feel like you're floating in an abyss without the familiar weight you've always carried. But that discomfort, that's not you doing something wrong. That's the sound of chains breaking, of old contracts dissolving, of your soul finally preparing for the return to its own authentic pulse. And when you break that pact, you're not just freeing yourself. You're opening a door that echoes through your entire lineage, backward and forward through time. Now we arrive at something both symbolic and intensely practical, a technique that functions like a bridge between the unconscious realm and your waking awareness. The vibrational mirror isn't some abstract spiritual concept you can only access through years of meditation. It's a living technology your soul already knows how to use. Here's how it works. Every emotion you feel, every pattern that repeats, every pain that returns carries a specific frequency, a vibrational signature that acts as a beacon pointing toward the hidden Akashic code beneath it. When you learn to use yourself as a mirror, when you stop trying to change or fix the emotion, and instead reflect it back to yourself with complete presence, something extraordinary happens. The emotion stops being just a feeling and becomes a messenger, revealing the fragment of your soul story that's been trying to get your attention all along. It's like tuning a radio. Most people are so busy trying to turn off the static that they never discover there's an entire broadcast hidden inside it. Let me give you a concrete example of how this technique actually works in practice. Say you notice that every time you're about to take a significant step forward in your life, a new relationship, a career move, a creative project, you feel this wave of inexplicable dread. Most people would try to push through it, meditate it away, or interpret it as fear of success. But the vibrational mirror technique asks you to do something radically different. Sit with that dread without any agenda to change it. Feel exactly where it lives in your body. Maybe it's a tightness in your chest, a heaviness in your belly, a coldness in your hands. Then, instead of analyzing it with your mind, you ask the sensation itself, what are you mirroring back to me? What part of my story are you reflecting? And you wait in the silence in that space between thought and intuition until an image emerges. Maybe you suddenly remember being 5 years old, excited about something, and watching that excitement die in your mother's exhausted eyes. That's not just a memory, that's an Akashic imprint, a moment when your soul learned that your expansion might burden others, so it created a pattern of dread to protect you from that pain. The power of this technique is that it bypasses the rational mind entirely and speaks directly in the soul's native language, symbols, sensations, and synchronicities. You're not trying to figure out your patterns intellectually. You're letting them reveal themselves through the mirror of your own vibrational field. Some people experience this as images, those inner visions of forests, ruins, or locked rooms that emerge when you're truly present with your pain. Others experience it as knowing, as sudden clarity about why a pattern exists without needing a logical explanation. And some people experience it through their body, a spontaneous release, a shift in temperature, a sense of something ancient finally being witnessed after years in exile. The key is consistency. This isn't a one-time practice. It's a ritual you return to whenever the oracle of your pain starts speaking. Over time, you develop a relationship with your vibrational mirror, learning to read the subtle signatures of different emotional frequencies, understanding which patterns are yours and which are ancestral, recognizing when the shadow is trying to protect you versus when it's ready to integrate. And here's the mysterious part. The more you use this technique, the more the Akashic code hidden in your pain starts revealing itself, not as punishment or problem, but as a sophisticated guidance system your soul has been using all along. The mirror doesn't just show you what's broken, it shows you the path back to your inner house, the reconnection that's been waiting behind every fragment, every wound, every repeating cycle. And that recognition alone can shift everything. So here's what I want you to do right now. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, but right now. Stop for a moment and ask yourself, what pain in my life keeps returning that I've been treating as an enemy instead of a messenger? What pattern keeps showing up that I've been calling my karma instead of recognizing as an unfinished symbol waiting to be decoded? Because here's the thing, you can spend another 10 years running from it, medicating it, trying to positive think your way around it. Or you can turn around right now and ask it what it's really trying to tell you. What fragment of your soul is it guarding? What part of your inner house has been locked away, waiting for you to finally have the courage to open that door? I'm not going to lie to you and say this is easy. Reading the Akashic code hidden in your pain requires you to sit with discomfort, to stay present with things your mind wants to flee from, to trust that your body's cellular memory holds wisdom your conscious mind has forgotten. It means treating your pain like the oracle it is, listening to it, learning its symbolic language, honoring the ancestral wounds it's revealing. But what's the alternative? Spending the rest of your life in that same cycle, wondering why nothing ever really changes, feeling like you're trapped in some cosmic punishment system you can't escape. That's not living. That's sleepwalking through your own existence. The truth is, your soul has been trying to initiate you into something deeper, something more real than the surface-level healing most people settle for. But initiation requires descent. It requires you to stop bypassing the shadow and start recognizing it as the guardian of your deepest truth. So I'm asking you, are you ready to stop fighting your pain and start reading it? Are you ready to discover what's been hidden in that repeating pattern all along? Because once you do, once you finish reading that symbol, once you integrate that spiritual trauma living in your cells, once you let the pain become the access key instead of the obstacle, you don't just heal, you become whole. You reconnect with the pulse of your true soul, the one that's been waiting in exile for you to finally come home. If this resonates with you, if something in you recognizes this truth, even if your mind wants to resist it, then subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because we're going deeper into these mysteries, into the forest of the psyche, into the ruins where your fragments are waiting, into the mythic time where your real transformation lives. This isn't surface-level content, this is soul work, and your soul is ready for the return. The question is, are you?